So good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to all of you who've joined us today for our webinar, How to Get Permission to Reuse Content in Your Publication, some practical tips. Firstly, let me introduce myself. I am Jeremy Brinton, Head of Publisher Relations at PLS, and conducting today's webinar are my colleagues, Rachel Hunt and Amy Ellis. Before we start, some basic housekeeping so that we ensure that you get the optimum engagement during the webinar. The audio is available through your computer speakers or by calling in by phone. And if you are experiencing poor sound quality using your computer, you can try dialing into the session by phone, and then in your control panel on the right-hand side under audio, just select telephone and follow the instructions using the access code and the audio pin when instructed. We will be conducting polls throughout the session, so those participants who remain muted, participants will remain muted, throughout the session. However, on the right-hand side of your screen, you'll see a control panel which includes a questions box. Please write any questions into the box during the course of the webinar. There will be a short Q&A at the end of this session. Please note that we can only answer questions that are applicable for the whole audience. So if you do have a specific query for your business, we can get back to you after this webinar with a call. And for other technical issues, please just use the questions box to let us know. We may be able to help you, not help you with all the technical issues, but we'll help where we can. So if you do miss anything from this webinar, you've arrived late, a video recording will be available shortly after this webinar. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we'll be covering 5 pertinent questions posed by requesters. And as you can see on the screen, when do I need to ask for permission to reuse content, firstly? Secondly, when do I not need permission? For example, what is fair dealing? Thirdly, what is the easiest and quickest way of getting permission? And fourthly, how much will the rights holder charge me? And last but not least, fifthly, what happens if I reuse content without permission? So just before we start, some basic information and background by way of context to explain who we are and what we do. While some of you may be familiar with the Publishers Licensing Society, I'd like to provide some background based on the following information, really. We've established in 1981 by 13 founder publishers and are run for the benefit of publishers in the UK. PLS is owned by and accountable to UK's 4 major publishing trade associations, the PA, PPA representing magazine publishers, ALPS, and most recently IPG since 2015, September 2015, all of which are represented on PLS board. We oversee collective licensing and administer the copying rights of 3,000, more than 3,600 book, magazine, journal and digital publishers in the UK collective licensing system, many more than all 4 trade association members collectively. We are a not-for-profit organisation, and PLS is funded by a 6% deduction from monies distributed to publishers to cover our administration costs. So the day-to-day work of the PLS team. We are a very small team. We currently comprise 15 staff. By signing up to PLS, publishers are relieved of the administrative burden of licensing users directly. We ensure licensing fee income is distributed fairly, evenly, and transparently to our signed-up publishers. Effectively, secondary licensing spans all sectors, but broadly falls into business, government, education, and overseas. We work closely with our licensing agencies, Copyright Licensing Agency, NLA Media Access, and consult regularly and widely with publishers to develop appropriate licenses that are fit for purpose and deliver a valuable complementary revenue stream to your primary business income. We strive to ensure an orderly marketplace for all of our rights holders and users, being actively involved as we are in promoting greater understanding and respect for copyright. And pertinently today, we offer tailored permission services to promote greater efficiencies, which you'll hear more about in just a moment. In fact, hot off the press, I'm absolutely delighted to tell you all that PLS has just won both the Digital Technology Application category at this year's Station Awards and the overall prize for Innovator of the Year for PLS Clear, our permissions tool and service for requesters. The judges were unanimous and were all very impressed by both the purpose of the project and the IT behind it. So moving swiftly on and opening our first poll today, we'll be sharing some intelligence from all of you, but I would encourage you to participate. Please do. How are you involved in permissions? This will give us an idea of whether you're a requester or manage permissions, or perhaps neither directly or indirectly. I'll just allow you a moment to do that while the poll is running. So do answer. Right, well that's interesting. Are we almost there? No, with a few more people to answer. So 82% of you have voted, that's great. So I think actually like a big reveal, I can say that 68% of you do seek permission from other rights holders, and 39 of you other rights holders seek permission. So we've got 19 other there. So that's great. Thank you very much for answering that. And then swiftly on to our second poll. And this is very basic. Are you an author or writer or a publisher? Somebody who works in a publishing house, a rights professional or other? So I'm just going to give you a moment to complete that poll and share some intelligence with you from that. What's there? Some of you just completing that. Okay, so that's useful before I hand over to Rachel, but 78% of you are a publisher or someone who works in publishing, and 3% are author or writer, and 6% of you are rights professionals, and then there's 14% of you who are other. So that's really useful actually. Thank you very much for completing those polls, and that's a good point to hand over to my colleague Rachel Hunt. So over to you, Rachel.
Okay, so my name's Rachel. I'm one of the product managers for PLS Clear. Yeah, so I'm going to talk to you about points from the agenda 1 and 2. So when do I need to ask for permission and when do I not need to ask for permission? Before we begin properly, I just want to reiterate that we are not copyright lawyers. We're unable to give you very specific legal information based, on your specific cases. This webinar is to kind of go over the whole permissions process and kind of looking at when generally you do and don't need to ask for permission. Please do feel free to ask questions. The ones that we can't answer at the end of this webinar, we'll get back to you afterwards. If we can't answer them ourselves, then we are more than happy to point you in the right direction to somebody that can. So the first question is, when do I need to ask for permission? You need to ask for permission when a work is protected by copyright, so when it's owned by somebody else. A work may be literary, it may be dramatic, It may be artistic or musical. A full list of these can be found on the Intellectual Property Office website, which moving forward I'll refer to as the IPO. So, the Copyright Designs and Patent Act of 1988 gives creators the exclusive rights in the works that they have created, provided that they are original in the sense that they have not been copied from another work. Such rights include, most significantly, the exclusive right to reproduce or copy their works and distribute them to the public. Other rights include the right to lend, to perform in public, to communicate to the public, and to adapt the work. If you wish to use copyrighted work in any of the ways that I've just mentioned, you may only do so with permission from the owner of the copyright. Just as a note, that finding content on the internet does not alter its copyright status. So unless there is wording to the contrary on that particular website, such as a Creative Commons license or an Open Government license, you cannot reuse the content without permission. So does this mean that you should be asking the author for permission directly? Well, not necessarily. Most authors assign or license the rights granted under the Copyright Act to the publishers. This is because publishers can help with the publication and promotion of work. So request for permission should generally be made to the publisher in the first instance, and then the publisher may forward the request on to the author or literary agent in the case of any right version. If it's not been possible to identify or trace the rights holder, and you do plan to publish within the UK, you may be able to apply for an orphan works license. This you can apply for direct from the IPO, but before you do so, you will have to demonstrate to them that you have done a diligent search. So that means that you will have to prove that you have exhausted all other options of tracing a rights holder, and the orphan works license is the very, very kind of final straw. But also the IPO on their website do have a list of previously issued orphan works licenses. So before you get to the point of applying for a license, it's definitely worth having a look through the register to see what's already been issued. So moving on to point 2 on the agenda, when do I not need to ask for permission? So there's 3 scenarios where you do not need to ask. The first is if it's out of copyright. The second is if it's not substantial. And the third is if a statutory copyright exception applies, i.e. fair dealings. So looking at the very first scenario, how do you know when a work is out of copyright? The Copyright Act provides for copyright protection for the author's life plus 70 years. So if the author is deceased and 70 years have passed since his or her death, then you can reuse the work without permission. If there is more than one author, it will be 70 years after the death of the last surviving author. There are some variations to this general rule, which include when the work has not been made available to the public during the author's lifetime, any anonymous or pseudonym work, any Crown or Parliamentary copyright, translations, and the typographical arrangement in the published work which belongs to the publisher. If your intended reuse falls into any of these categories, we would recommend that you consult the Society of Author Permissions Guidelines for more details, which is the URL that's on your screen right now. So I'll just give you a moment if anybody wants to note that down. If not, feel free to ask us later and we can send it round. So, the second scenario is when content is unsubstantial. So the Copyright Act does not define substantial, so the courts have applied a subjective test, i.e. it's on a case-by-case basis. They will consider the quality rather than the quantity of the material reused. So whilst a few sentences from a long novel may not be considered substantial, a few lines from a poem may be. If you're ever in doubt, we always recommend that you should seek permission if unsure. Okay, moving on to the third and final reason is fair dealing. The Copyright Act lists various categories of reuse that you do not require permission from the rights holder. These are generally considered to be in the public interest. you need to first consider whether your intended reuse falls into any of the categories, and secondly, whether the reuse meets the fair dealing criteria. So this is a two-step process. The categories for reuse include research for non-commercial purposes, for private study, for criticism, review and quotation, for reporting of current events, for caricature, parody or pastiche, or for the illustration for instruction. If your planned reuse falls into any of these categories, you then need to determine whether you're dealing with is fair. Again, the Copyright Act doesn't define fair, so it's determined case by case. The general consideration here is whether the content prejudices the legitimate interests of the original author. So again, if you're unclear whether your planned reuse falls under fair dealings, we will always recommend you contacting the rights holder, whether that be the publisher or author in the case of a rights diversion, or we'd recommend that you consult with a lawyer. If you decide that your planned reuse is fair dealings, you are required to provide sufficient acknowledgement of your source. This is usually by noting the work in question and its copyright owner and who it's likely to be, which is likely to be the publisher in the case of a published work. So that's these are the scenarios covered by when you need to ask for permission. So I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Amy, who is going to talk you through actually gaining permission. So I'll hand you over now.
Hello, I'm Amy. I am also one of the product managers for PLS Clear. So now we're going to move on to what is the easiest, quickest way of getting permission to reuse content. The problem is requesters have found the requesting process to be very frustrating and protracted. The process is often very frustrating because it's difficult to identify the current rights holder, find the right contact within the rights holding organization, know what information to supply to rights holders in order for them to respond the first time around, and to determine whether a fee will be charged, and if so, how much. Publishers are often very slow to respond as well, so response times can range from just a couple days to more than 8 weeks. Lengthy delays can impact publishing schedules, particularly if requests are made after a manuscript is completed. So some of the best ways to start getting permission is that some publishers ask to contact them directly and will have contact information on their website. However, some other publishers will ask that you use an online service to secure permission. So there's a couple different options available, such as RightsLink, the Rights Portal from the Copyright Agency in Australia, and PLS Clear, which was developed by PLS as a free service to help streamline the process of making permission requests. PLS Clear helps facilitate the permissions process in a couple of different ways. First of all, it makes sure that the request goes straight to the right contact at the correct rights holding organization. PLS has a database of over 3,600 UK publishers and a title base that is supplemented by Bowker and Nielsen. Second of all, we also make sure that the correct information is submitted initially. There's a number of required fields in our request wizard that are crucial for the publisher to make a decision on whether or not to grant a permissions request. Another way is that requests for up to 10 extracts can be made at one time, and the form also allows you to request as many formats to reuse content as well. We also offer project management tools, which I'll show you in the demo, that allow for you to make multiple requests to reuse content in the same project. PLS Clear also offers automated responses for free of charge and fee payable requests if the publisher has set up parameters for those. So you could receive a response immediately for requests put through the system. We also offer a PLS Clear help desk, which is manned from 9 to 5 UK time during the week. and we offer assistance if you have any trouble with the request form, or if you haven't heard back from the publisher, we can help chase up on responses. Now I'm just going to give you a quick demo of how to make a request through PLS Clear. Okay, so if you are a brand new requester, you can either create an account before you make your request, or you can make an account at the very end of your request. So the first thing you will need to do is to search for your title. You can search for titles a couple of different ways. We offer a keyword search, a title search, author search, as well as ISBN and ISSN. We recommend that you always search for titles by ISBN or ISSN, as it'll provide the most accurate search results. However, if you do decide to search by keyword or title, you will be provided with a list of titles to choose from. So do make sure that the publisher name is the correct one for the book that you're requesting. Once you select your title, you'll be taken to the request wizard, which is a questionnaire that was designed specifically by rights professionals for making permission requests. As I said before, you can request up to 10 extracts at once, and you can request text, illustrations, poems, tables, and complete chapters. Once you select what type of content you are licensing, you'll be taken to the first page of the form, which is asking more details on that content. Since we asked for a text extract, we have to type in the number of words we're reusing as well as the page numbers. Those are the two required fields. However, we do encourage you to fill out as much information as possible. Next, you move on to how you're going to be reusing the content. If you've already set up an account, you may have some saved projects, which will pull in all of the information that you've entered before, so you don't have to keep typing in the same answers over and over again. However, if you don't have any projects set up, you'll be provided with a list of different options. There are about 150 different types of reuse, so however you're going to be reusing your content, it will probably be on this list. Next, you'll be asked to provide a little bit more information on how you're going to be reusing the content. So the purpose of use, the sector that you're working in, the title of your work, the author, and the publisher, as well as the territories you're publishing in, print run, and the retail price. Again, these questions will be determined based on the planned use that you've selected before, so you may not get the same questions every time. On the last stage, you have one last chance to review what you've entered, just to make sure everything is correct. Please make sure that what you've entered is what you want to appear on the license, because once you submit the request, it cannot be altered. We also recommend that you double check your contact details at the very end, just to make sure everything is correct, and that you enter the correct licensee name that you would like to appear on the license if it's not your name. Once you submit your request, you will have a chance to save all of those usage details that you've entered as a project. Submitted requests go directly into your request manager, which is a permissions inbox, so you can check the status of your permission at a glance at any time. There will also be a copy of your request sent directly to the publisher's inbox as well, so they have all of the details of your request at a glance. The request manager provides a dialogue back and forth between you and the publisher, which is always time and date stamped, so you have a record of everything that's said. You can also add a comment with any additional information that you think the publisher needs to know, and you can also respond to quotations and licenses that are provided through the system. Okay, some top tips for submitting your permission requests through PLS Clear. The first tip is to aim to submit your permission request a good 6 to 8 weeks in advance of your deadline. While PLS Clear does allow publishers to set automated responses, not all publishers are using that functionality at this time. So while you may receive a response very quickly, it also could take 6 to 8 weeks. So do make sure you leave plenty of time. Always check that you're asking for permission from the current rights holder of the title. If you're not searching by ISBN or ISSN and you're searching by title, please make sure that you're selecting the correct title by the correct publisher. Always search for the ISBN or the ISSN to find the exact title in the database. Make sure that you're getting the correct title the first time. If you're searching for a journal, we recommend that you search for the title of the journal or the ISSN and not the DOI or the article title. PLS Clear doesn't currently have the functionality to search by article title or by DOI, so you won't get any search results if that's what you're looking for. Do make sure that you supply the article details for journal articles in the request wizard though. When you're submitting a request, be sure that all of the required information is completed before submitting your request. The wizard should not let you progress without filling in that information. However, if you, for some reason, can, just make sure you fill in everything that you can before you complete the wizard. And then ensure that you register with PLS Clear to make sure that your request is actually submitted. If you don't actually have an account with a password set up, the request will just be held in our database and it won't actually be sent to the publisher. So make sure that you've submitted a request and received a confirmation email at the end in order for the request to be sitting with the publisher. For poems and poetry, we do process some permission requests for poetry. But they have to be for poems that have been published in titles with an ISBN. So if it's a one-off poem or something that's very small and may not have an ISBN associated with it, you may have to either email us or contact a resource such as the Poetry Library in order to get in touch with the author. PLS Clear currently only handles permissions for books and serials. So we cannot handle permissions for newspapers, music, photography, and websites. All right, moving on. How much will the rights holder charge me? How much the permission request is charged depends entirely on the publisher. So they may charge a fee or they might grant the permission free of charge, but it's entirely up to them. PLS cannot suggest fees for permissions. So if you have a query about the price of a permission request, you will need to respond to the rights holder directly in your request manager. And finally, what happens if I reuse content without permission? If you publish a work that includes material owned by someone else and they have not given their permission for its use, they have a range of options. They can ask for the work to be withdrawn, which may involve pulping a print run if you've already gone to print. They can ask for an acknowledgement in the work. They can ask for a share of your fees, or a fee or share of revenues, and they can also ask for a public apology. However, if they're not satisfied with any of these options, they could sue you for infringement. So if you're in doubt about whether or not you need to ask for permission, we always recommend that you go ahead and ask, just to be safe. That is the end of the agenda. We've got a couple of questions and we've got some time to answer them.
Okay, so somebody has asked if PLS Clear work with US publishers. At the moment, we're predominantly UK based. The majority of our publishers signed up to PLS Clear are based in the UK. So, I mean, if you push through requests for US titles, generally what we'll do is we will track down the easiest way to contact them and then we'll forward that information on. But as it stands at the moment, we don't work with US publishers. Somebody else has asked what the difference between PLS Clear and the Copyright Centre is. So CCC have a service called RightsLink, which is basically their version in the US. We kind of operate like on a mutually exclusive basis. So we have we use PLS Clear in the UK, so if requesters are wanting to pay in pounds, then they can use PLS Clear to do so. Copyright Clearance Centre's RightsLink, they operate in US dollars, so if you're looking at content and you want to pay in US dollars, then you can use their service.
We should also mention that RightsLink is mostly for STM publishers, whereas PLS Clear is available for all sectors. So you're more likely to be able to reach a trade publisher through PLS Clear.
If that's all the questions for now, then we'd like to thank you all for attending. If there are any other questions that you think of later on, please do feel free to email us. You can email plsclear@pls.org.uk and we'll be happy to answer what we can. So thank you very much.